Well, summer 2019 has arrived, and that is incredible to me because I'm like, man, time just goes that fast. And here we are, summer is here. And this week, my boys, they're in LISD, so this was their last week of school, and so they just finished it up. And, as we were going into summer, as I was thinking about summer, and Jill and I, my beautiful wife and I just had this question this whole week thinking about summer. And the question that was running through my mind was this, is what would make this summer a great summer? Like, Buck, what would make this summer for you and Jill and your family one of those summers that's just a memorable summer? That we could get to August and look back on the summer of 2019 and go, wow, that was just that was such a great summer. And so I thought about a lot of different things, what would make this summer like that a great summer. One of the things I thought, man, if Jill and I could go on a beach vacation with our boys and the whole vacation, the whole ride down to the beach, the whole ride back in the car, if our boys just got along, like if they were just like kumbaya with one another, it just was like this harmony, I'd be like, that would be awesome. I don't know if that's even possible, but I thought about that. And then the other thing I thought, okay, what else would make this summer just a great summer? I thought it would be so cool if all summer long, every single day, if I could eat Blue Bell cookies and cream, because I love Oreo cookies and I love super cold milk. Like I'll put it in the freezer, because I love it and dipping the whole thing. I thought if I could eat that the entire summer and get to August and lose weight, I'd be like, that is awesome. That's a great summer. And I thought about a lot of other things, but something else I thought, man, this would be so cool if it happened. I thought if Jill and I were standing there one day and our boys came up to us at the beginning of summer, and they just said, hey, Mom and Dad, we've been thinking a lot, and so this entire summer, we've made a decision. Not one time this whole summer are we going to play Fortnite. I thought, wow, that would feel so good. But you see, there's a tension, because if you ask our 5 sons, if you're like, hey, what would make your summer the greatest summer ever? You know what they would say? They would say, if we could play Fortnite 24/7 every single day this summer, it would make the greatest summer ever. So there's a tension in our house around that. Anyways, but my point is this. I think this is an important question for us to ask as we're going into summer. What would make this summer a great summer, but for you? As you think about your family and you think about, your kids or your relationships or dating relationships, like for you, what would lead to a great summer? The word great literally means out of the ordinary, which means extraordinary. The word great literally means remarkable. And so as you think about your life, as you think about your relationships, as you think about this summer, what would lead you to a place that you could get to August and you could look back on summer of 2019 and personally, for you, for your family, for your relationships, that you would go, this was the greatest summer ever? What would have to happen? Well, guys, that's the question we're going to be talking about in this series. Over the next 2 weeks in this series, we're going to be talking about how can we get to a place that ultimately we can look back and say that was extraordinary, that was a remarkable summer. And specifically, we're going to talk about 2 choices. And these are 2 choices that are so practical that every single one of us, regardless if you're a Christian or not, that every single one of us can take a step towards these choices. And if we're willing to do it, if we're willing to accept the invitation and move into these choices and make this choice in our life, it just sets us up. It puts us in the most probable position possible to get to the end of the summer and go, wow, that was a great summer. So the question becomes, what are those choices? Well, today we're going to talk about the first choice. And to do that, I want us to hear from Jesus, because actually 2,000 years ago, Jesus invited you and Jesus invited me into this choice. And he said, hey, if you're willing to trust me, because choices are all about trust, if you're willing to trust me and make this choice, Jesus invited us into greatness. Jesus invited us to do something extraordinary. So again, the question is, Jesus, what did you invite us into? And so we discover that in Mark chapter 10. In fact, in Mark chapter 10, to give you a little bit of context, this is at the end of Jesus' life. So think about this. Jesus has been doing ministry from 30 to 33 for 3 years, right? So at the end of the 3 years, Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem. And he's on his way to Jerusalem with his 12 guys. So they're called the 12 disciples. So there you have Matthew, and you have James, and you have Peter, and Bartholomew, and Thaddeus, and Thomas, all the guys. And so they're walking to Jerusalem. Here's Jesus kind of leading them. They're on their way. And the 12 disciples, they're so giddy. They're so excited. In fact, you could even kind of say they're kind of skipping on their way to Jerusalem. But at the same time, not only is there, excitement with the 12 disciples, but at the exact same time, there's some fear. At the exact same time, there's some unknowns, like, oh, how's this all going to work? And the reason why they had both of those feelings is because what they knew, according to Jewish tradition, what they learned growing up in the Jewish tradition, is that once the Messiah came, the Messiah would ultimately establish his kingdom when he went to Jerusalem. And they looked at Jesus and they're like, okay, Jesus, we believe you're the Messiah. We're on our way to Jerusalem. This seems like the moment that you're going to establish yourself as the king of all kings, and you're going to establish your earthly kingdom. At least that's what they thought. But they also knew, according to the Jewish tradition, that when the Messiah was going to establish his kingdom, that there would be tension, that the Messiah would overthrow the high priest, that the Messiah would have to overthrow the Roman government. And so there was this kind of duplicitous emotion to go, on one hand, Jesus is about to be the king of all kings. And on the other hand, they're going, how's that all going to work? I wonder what that tension is going to look like. So imagine that. There's Jesus on the way to Jerusalem, his 12 disciples following him. And it's at the end of his life. So that's the context. And so they're all on their way, and there's two disciples named James and John. James and John are part of the 12 disciples. James and John have a nickname. Their nickname is Sons of Thunder. And the reason why they were called Sons of Thunder is because they had so much energy. They were very outspoken. In fact, most theologians would agree, and this is fairly interesting, that the 12 disciples were aged 20 and under, which means all 12 of those disciples were young. So imagine, here's James and John called the Sons of Thunder with all this vigor and all this energy. And so these two guys come up to Jesus on their way to Jerusalem, and they ask Jesus this question. Look at what they said. Teacher, they said, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. Now, what a positioning statement, right? This is like those people in your life that come up to you and they're like, hey, what are you doing this weekend? You're like, why are you asking? Hey, don't you have a truck? Don't you have a truck? You're like, yes, but I'd like to know why you're asking, because you're wanting me to answer before, this whole thing, this dynamic. This is what's going on. So James and John, just think about these teenage guys. They're coming up to Jesus and they're like, Jesus, I want you to say yes before we ask you this question, right? And so kind of treating Jesus, kind of thinking about God like a genie in the bottle God. Hey, if I just rub it the right way, I'll get God to do what I want him to do. This is their thinking. And so Jesus did what he always does. He's so incredibly patient, and he decided to go with it. So he responded, and he said, what do you want me to do for you? He asked. They replied, let one of us sit at your right and the other at your left in your glory. Now, remember the context. Jesus is going to Jerusalem. In their minds, they're thinking he's about to establish his kingdom. He's about to be the king of all kings, and for eternity, he's going to establish this earthly kingdom. That's what they're thinking. And so they're going, okay, Jesus, you're going to get the top office. You're going to get the corner office on the top floor. We just want the offices next to you, on your left and your right. Jesus, you're about to get all this glory. Like everything's about to funnel up to you. So Jesus, we're just thinking, just conversation. Do you think we could hang out with you? Do you think we could sit at your left and your right so we could receive some of that glory as well? And again, you just have to think about this. Jesus knew he was about to go to Jerusalem and be crucified. In fact, he tried to tell the guys, but the guys were so tunnel focused or, had tunnel vision. No, you're going to become the king. You're going to become the king. They just couldn't even hear what Jesus was saying. So Jesus is about to be crucified, and here he has the guys, James and John, going, hey, it's all about me, and it's about my power. I want to be on your left and your right. And again, Jesus' patience, he just engages that conversation. He says to James and John, guys, you just don't know what you're asking. You don't know the cost that it will cost you to be at my left and to my right. So they're having this conversation, Jesus, James, and John. But remember, there's 12 disciples, and they're all walking together on their way to Jerusalem. So what are the other 10 doing? Well, we know, because it continues. And it says, when the 10 heard about this, that's like Matthew, that's Peter, that's Thomas, that's Judas, the guys. When they heard about this, they became indignant with James and John. Now, indignant literally means anger because it's unfair. It's unfair what's happening, so I'm getting angry about this whole thing. So imagine this scene. Here's Jesus. He's about to be arrested, spit upon, crucified, falsely accused. All that's about to happen. And here are his followers, the culmination of his ministry, like it's at the very end. And all they're doing is bickering like a bunch of teenagers, right? It's about me. It's about me. No, it's about my power. Well, this is unfair. No, I should get it. No, Peter, I should get it. Imagine that scene. And Jesus, he's got to be going, guys, what are you doing? What are you doing? And so Jesus in that moment, incredible patience. Again, Jesus is way more patient with you than perhaps you've been taught. And it's displayed here in all this patience in that moment. He rallies the 12. He said, guys, maybe let's go over by this tree. We're not to Jerusalem yet. Let's go sit down and let me explain something to you. And so they're sitting down. Jesus looks at the 12 and he says, you know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. You know how that works, right, guys? And they're all like, yeah. You know how the Greeks and the Romans, there's Caesar, there's the Senate, the god of the Romans, Jupiter, you know all the Greek gods. You know how this whole kind of hierarchical, leadership thing works, that everything flows to Caesar. Everything flows to the leader, and the leader will leverage their power to maintain their power. The leader will leverage their authority to keep their authority. They'll do anything and everything necessary because they love the fact everything flows up to them. You know that, guys, don't you? I mean, if Jesus was here today, Jesus would say, hey, you guys know how the corporate world works, right? We'd all go, yeah, the corporate world kind of looks like this. It's you, it's the person at the top, you, and everybody else is for you. So it's like, yeah, I'm here, I'm the leader, everybody else is for me. They're for my legacy, they're for my pocketbook, they're for my title. You're here to serve me. You're here for the benefit of me. Everything flows to me. And I will leverage my power. If you get in the way of my authority, I will leverage my power to get you out of the way. Because everybody who works for me needs to serve me. And all the 12 disciples get this. They're like, yeah. Jesus, this is why we're asking you to sit on your left and your right. Because we want that kind of power. We want that kind of authority. We want that kind of glory to flow to us. And Jesus looks at the guys, and he perhaps looks at you and me, and he says, not so with you. Don't you ever do that as my follower. This is not how my kingdom works. And then the guys have to hear this, and they're like, oh, okay, Jesus, you're doing your thing again. What do you mean? This is the way it always works. This is the way you get things done. This is the way we've seen it our whole life. Then what do you mean? Jesus says, not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great, remarkable, extraordinary among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first, that's the idea of making progress, leaving your mark on this world, doing something transcendent. Whoever wants to be that, Jesus said that's fine if you want to be that. But you need to know, must be slave of all. In other words, Jesus says, guys, I'm inviting you into something extraordinary. I'm inviting you into something that is so great and so remarkable, but you're going to have to trust me because this is going to feel like a paradox. And you know what a paradox is? A paradox is that whole idea about saying, hey, I'm going to give it away, but I'm actually going to get something greater. A paradox is like, I'm going to go left, but I actually am going right. I'm going to go forward, but I'm actually going back. It's like this intellectual conundrum to where it's just hard to get our minds around. And Jesus is saying, yeah, if you really want to be extraordinary, guys, if you really want to leave your mark, if you really want to see progress happen, yeah, we want that. Then I'm telling you, you've got to leverage your power, your authority, your resources for the benefit of those on the other side of you. That'll leave a mark. That's where greatness is found. Now, let's just be honest. Again, I think the 12 disciples, they hear that and they're like, okay. Jesus, that's sweet and all. Appreciate that. We've never seen that modeled. But I'm not sure we're buying it. We've never seen that take place. What do you mean? And if you're here today or if you're watching or listening online and maybe there's a little bit of a flinch inside of you, maybe when you hear this idea, I'm going to leverage me for the benefit of those around me, there's that thing inside of you that just kind of pushes back and you're like, I'm not so sure, Buck. Yeah, I'm not so sure that's really going to leave. I'm not so sure that's great leader. I'm not so sure that's going to make things move forward, you know? Because, I mean, that just doesn't make a lot of sense. If that's you, I get it. I get it. But here's the thing. If we were just talking and you said, no, I don't think this really works. This doesn't work in the real world, doesn't work in the corporate world, may work in the church world where you all hold hands and sing Kumbaya all week. You know, maybe that's what you think we do. But, you know, it's like it may work there, nonprofit, but in the real world, not so much. If that's you, it's fair. It's fair. But here's what I'd want you to at least think, or at least reason together. What I'd love you to think about is this, is when you think of the life of Jesus, just think of him. And you think of the fact that his ministry was only 3 years. He didn't for decades or, you know, for centuries. No, 3 years of ministry, that's it. Jesus Christ never traveled outside of a 100-mile radius from where he's born. But Jesus created the greatest movement human history has ever seen. Jesus created the greatest movement. He was the greatest leader our world has ever seen. And to even take that a little bit further, just to kind of illustrate this, and be careful with what, I'm going to try to be careful with what I'm about to say, but just listen carefully to what I'm about to say. Think about it this way. Let me illustrate it this way. Think about in the world, today, in the world, the largest franchises in the world. If you just ask the question, what are the largest franchises, like the greatest movements in the world, you know, in terms of the business side? You know, the third largest franchise is McDonald's, and they have 37,000 locations all around the world. The second largest franchise in the entire world, which is a surprise to me, is Subway. Like, I didn't know that. I was like, wow. They have 44 locations, or 44,000 locations all around the world. The biggest franchise, the largest franchise in the world is 7-Eleven. Did you guys know that? Isn't that interesting? They have 56,000 locations all around the world. When you think of the church, and do not hear me say the church is a franchise, because that's not what I'm saying, but just as an illustration, when you think of the church has 37 million locations around the world. If you're a leader, if you're thinking about leadership, if you're thinking about progress, if you're thinking about how do you get things done, how do you move the ball down the fairway, I mean, how do you do that? Then I'm just telling you, you've got to look at the life of Jesus. If you're a Christian or not, he's the greatest leader, created the greatest movement the world has ever seen. And if the question is, well, what was the distinctive? What was it about Jesus? I mean, there's so many things, but what was one of the big distinctives of Jesus? Jesus would lean into you and to me and say, it's this. It's to choose to leverage me for the benefit of you. If you're willing to choose to leverage me for the benefit of you, that's where extraordinary, that's where the remarkable is found. And that's your experience, isn't it? I mean, that's what you felt in a relationship. If you've ever been in a relationship to where somebody said, hey, I'm here for you. I'm here for your benefit. I'm here to leverage me for your benefit. If you've ever been on the other side of a spouse like that, if you've ever been on the other side of a friend who just, man, I mean, they're there like that. They're like, hey, I'm here to leverage me for your benefit. What does that feel like? That's so empowering. That's so rich. I mean, I think about my beautiful wife, Jill. I mean, she's amazing. She gets this right so often, but I'm telling you, when I know and I'm walking out the door and I know, man, she is 100% behind me and she's going, man, how can I leverage me for your benefit? I'm just telling you, it empowers me to think, man, I could take on anything that I may face this day. It just breathes life into your relationships. It breathes life into your kids. It breathes life into an organization. If you've ever been led by an organizational leader who was thinking, hey, I'm here for your benefit. What can I do to help? How can I leverage my authority for your benefit? It's gold, isn't it? But you've also been on the flip side of that, haven't you? You know, that friend or maybe that marriage or maybe that, you know, that thing in your life, that relationship where the person's always like, hey, you're here for my benefit. Hey, you're here to make me feel a certain way. And you better do this and this and this. And if you don't do this, then I'm not going to feel a certain way. You are here to serve me. You are here to benefit me. Now just put yourself for a second in that kind of relationship, maybe a friendship, maybe a marriage, maybe whatever. Maybe that's the way your dad treated you. What does that do to you? What does that feel like? I think we all would raise our hands and go, oh, that's so disempowering. If you've ever had a boss and an organizational leader, what does that do to the organization? It just stifles creativity. It stifles innovation. It creates all kinds of silos in the organization when that's the culture. And that's Jesus' point. He said, guys, I'm extending an invitation to something remarkable. But you're going to have to make a choice to choose to leverage you for the benefit of the person on the other side of you. Now, I think we hear that and sometimes we're like, okay, I could try to wrap my mind around that. But then sometimes we're like, is there any more evidence to that? Is there any more anything that really punctuates that? And what's so cool is every generation there's a leadership guru in our culture. Right? In the 80s and 90s, it was Stephen Covey. He wrote, hey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And you're kind of in the organizational world or business world, you've probably read that book. Maybe John Maxwell was your guy, or maybe Patrick Lencioni, great thinker in the last couple, decades. Or maybe you've heard of a guy who wrote the book Good to Great, Jim Collins. Good to Great is one of those books that it's a little bit older, but it's a fascinating read about leadership. And Jim's whole quest in the book Good to Great was to go, what does a good organization have to do to be a great organization? And his whole quest was not only that, but to go, what does a good leader have to do to become a great leader? What happens? And Jim spent thousands of hours and took his entire team and interviewed so many CEOs and organizational leaders and great businesses around the country. He spent all this time, and he went into his research. He thought the distinctive that's going to move somebody to be a good to a great leader is charisma. This is what he assumed. He thought, man, charisma is going to be it. If you find a catalytic person who's super charismatic and they can pitch a vision and get everybody rallied, man, that's a great leader. And what his research found, and he was just making observations, what his research found is that the more charismatic leader that was there, that they were kind of a flash in the night. That they could build something really quick, but it wouldn't last a generation, that it would fall just as quick. And what he discovered, it's not charisma, that the distinguishing characteristic is humility. Humility. And humility isn't thinking less of yourself, it's just thinking about yourself less. Because I'm thinking about you. And I'm thinking about her, and I'm thinking about him, and I'm thinking about them, and how I can leverage, me for their benefit. That's humility. In fact, Jim put it together in his book called Good to Great, and here's what he says. I love how he phrases this. He says, level 5 leaders embody a paradoxical, what we were talking about, mix of personal humility and professional will. They are ambitious to be for sure, but ambitious first and foremost for the company and not for themselves. They're ambitious for the person on the other side of them, not for themselves. And what's fascinating, this is exactly what Jesus taught 2,000 years ago. And it works. The bottom line is to choose to leverage me for the benefit of you. If you and I are going to get to August, if in your relationship that you're going, man, I really want to begin to take steps and move to a place where it's extraordinary, it's remarkable. What does that even look like? Jesus would invite you and invite me to make a choice to leverage me for the benefit of you. That's a game changer in parenting. That's a game changer in a marriage. That's a game changer with a coach, or if you're a teacher or you have some authority, leveraging your authority for the benefit of those under your authority. Ooh, that's a big, big deal. And the question can become, well, what does that look like? All right, that's great, but practically speaking, as I walk out, of these doors and get in my car and go home, okay, that's great, but bring it home. What can I do practically today in my relationships? What can I do on Monday morning in my organization to begin shifting the culture? Well, there's a question, and if you're willing to ask this question, this is a big, big, game-changing kind of question, and the question is this, is what can I do to help? So simple, so powerful. Hey, babe, I know you've had a long day, and I know I've had a long day, but is there anything I can do to help? Anything I can do to help tonight? With your kids, hey, I know there's a lot going on, and they're like, Dad, you got so much going on, or Mom, you got so much. I know, but hey, anything I can help with this morning, sweetie? Anything I can help with? I know this is the last week of school. Anything I can leverage me for the benefit of you is when you ask this question. Again, if you're a coach or if you have some authority, with your team, with those who directly report to you to walk in on Monday morning, you've got so much on your plate. This is not about convenience. This is not about comfort. This is about greatness. And the question becomes, hey, Bob, hey, Sally, hey, anything I can do to be helpful this week? I'm telling you, that is a game changer. So here's what I want us to do, real quick, because this This is so important. I want us together, and this is kind of an all skate, so everybody's got to kind of play along, right? I want us to all together say this out loud. Say this question out loud. And if that makes you uncomfortable, then I'm with you. I hate when people ask me to do this, but I'm going to ask you to do it. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, and then I want us to go, what can I do to help? I want you to hear yourself ask this question. So you guys ready? Okay, 1, 2, 3. What can I do to help? Okay, one more time with a little bit more passion. Here we go. Ready on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. What can I do to help? That was awesome. And guys, I'm so glad you asked me that question. Because I actually have something that I'd love you to help with, right? Now, at this point, you're probably going, well, you know, in this message book, you had me up until then, and now it feels like bait and switch, or it feels like you had an agenda, right? And I'll just be honest with you. I did have an agenda. So be very honest. But here's the deal. Here's the deal. Before we get to that, here's what I want you to hear. If you decide, you know, the thing I'm about to talk about to help with, if you decide to help with that or not, that's your decision. I totally get that. But the thing I desire for you the very most, honestly, is what our mission is as a church, to lead people in a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. I want you to experience him at a greater level in your life. I want you to experience Christ at a greater level in your relationships. And if you were to say, well, Buck, from today's, conversation, what's one practical thing I can do to take one step to grow my relationship with Christ? I would just say one super practical thing is to make it a consistent practice in your relationships and whatever you do, to go, what can I do to help? Hey, how can I leverage me for the benefit of you? And if that's all you take away today, that is fantastic. But there is something that's really, really important to talk about, and there is something I really want to ask you to consider to help with. And the thing I want you to consider helping with is right up here, Camp 75. Camp 75 is the greatest thing we do to be for the next generation over the summer. It is incredibly remarkable. It's one of the greatest things we do to be for our community through the next generation. And when it comes to middle school and high school, it's one of the greatest things we do to be, a catalyst to their leadership, to be a catalyst to them, these next generation high school, middle schoolers growing in their faith with Jesus Christ. It is remarkable. It's the best thing you can possibly do over the summer. So if you and I were talking about Camp 75 and you're like, okay, that's the first time I heard that, you've just kind of built it up. It's the best thing ever. Like, what is that? You're like, what are the parts? What does that look like? So here's what I would say. Camp 75 really looks like this. In May, we have what we call Captain's Camp. This May, it's already happened. It's over the weekend. We take, these captains to kind of a weekend retreat. And what's really cool is we took almost 100 high school captains. And these almost 100 high school captains, they had to go through an interview process. In other words, it wasn't easy to become a captain. And some people were told yes, some people were told no, because leadership is so important. And so they had about 100 high school, captains go to this retreat, and they talked about leadership. They talked about the things we're talking about today. How do you make an impact? They talked about how you engage the culture. They talked about the why behind our vision and mission as a church. So many amazing things. And so all these captains came together over the weekend, and they're getting ready to lead because of what's coming up next, which is boot camp. And boot camp's going to happen in just a couple weeks. It's June 18th through the 22nd. And boot camp is so cool. This is where we have, about 400 to 500 middle school and high school students go to a week-long camp. And this year so far, we have a record number of students who have signed up. We've never seen this as a church. So many middle school and high school students sign up to go to boot camp. And at boot camp, they're going to learn very similar things to our captains, what they learned at Captain's Camp, all about leadership, engaging the culture, the why behind our vision and mission. And then at boot camp, they're going to discover their teams, to where the captain is going to find out who's their team. Their team is comprised of 5 to 10 middle school and high school students. And over that week camp, they're going to learn all kinds of things about one another. They're going to have a ton of fun and develop alignment and synergy as a team. And during boot camp, one of the coolest things is this is where the next generation hears about a God who really loves them. This is where the next generation is challenged to think about that God really exists and that God is for them, and they can have peace with God through Jesus Christ, who's given them meaning, who's given them purpose, and who has a plan for their life. It's awesome. We see so many students make that decision to put their trust in Christ. That's boot camp. And then after boot camp, they have their teams, there's alignment, there's all kinds of incredible leadership happening. And then we have our big week called Camp 75. And this happens July 15th through the 18th. So this is coming up a little over a month. And during the week of Camp 75, you have the captain, you have their teams. They go out into all these host homes, which are, people who said, hey, I want to open my front yard and backyard. And they go share with elementary age and preschool kids all about incredible things in terms of leadership. They share the incredible message that you can have peace with God. They have all kinds of fun, Wet and Wild Wednesday. It's wild to see what happens. So they go engage these students, student-led teams, engage our community in an incredible way. But in addition to that, they go and part of their time, half their time, they go and they serve the hungry. They serve the homeless. They serve the abused. They go and help in assisted living homes where there's so many people who just feel like I am incredibly lonely. And our students go sit with them and play games and talk. And it's incredible how they are for our community. All of that happens Camp 75 week. And then the culmination, the celebration of everything that took place with Camp 75 happens at Summerfest. That's going to be on July 21st. That's a Sunday. It's an incredible experience. So that is Camp 75. If I had to kind of put it, together and say, hey, what are all the pieces? So here's what I'm asking you to consider helping with. In terms of what to help with, the first thing I would ask you to consider is to consider helping with being a host home. So a host home is somebody who says, hey, during the week of July 15th through the 18th, I'm going to open my front yard or backyard in the morning or in the afternoon. And before Camp 75 week, I'm going to go and invite all the kids, elementary age, preschool kids in my neighborhood. And I'm going to invite them to come either in the morning or the evening, whatever camp time you select. And then our students will come and lead 75-minute camps in your front yard and backyard. And it's awesome. And people who've decided to do that, to say, hey, I'm going to be a host home, I'm going to take a risk, I'm going to help in that capacity. People who've said that, initially it's like, oh, that, how's that going to work? And I have to invite, and what's that like? And that's inconvenient and all this kind of stuff, which I get, I'm with you. But on the back end, at the end of the week of Camp 75, this is where I hear people all the time who said, hey, I'll be a host home. They're like, that was the greatest week of my life. I mean, I met neighbors I had no idea that were even in my neighborhood. And I saw the impact of the next generation on those kids. That's amazing. Our students here. I hear that all the time. So one of the ways you can help is to say, hey, I'm in. I'll be a host home. The second way I would ask you to really consider helping is to be a driver. If you have God-given NASCAR skills like myself, I think I do. Nobody else has confirmed that. But, if you feel like, man, I'm a driver, right? Or you are willing to be a driver. We've got all kinds of students in the morning of, July 15th through 18th. Tons of students. We'll have over 500 middle school and high school students that need to be driven to these host homes, as well as need to be driven to all kinds of places around the city of Austin to go serve and to be for people and for our community. And again, drivers, I hear this all the time. Drivers are like, oh my gosh, can I really do this, man? That, I don't know if I can. And then drivers will ask, if I drive all these students around, is it going to be loud and obnoxious? And the answer is yes. It will be very loud and obnoxious. If I drive these students around, hey, I like country music, do that, whatever it is, And you're going to have to change to their music. Like, they're going to play really loud music, and it's going to be a little bit chaotic. But I'm just telling you, I've heard it 1,000 times. Drivers who drive these students to these host homes or all around the city to serve in incredible ways, they're like, Buck, I'm just telling you, I was so nervous about it, but it was the greatest week. I got a front row seat to see a tangible impact on the homeless. I got a front row seat to see a 4-year-old, to see a 12. I got a front row seat to see the activity of what God is doing through the next generation, and it was awesome. That's the second way. The third way is to sponsor a student. This year for our boot camp, which is really cool, is we have a record number of students signed up for boot camp. We'll have anywhere between 400 to 500 students when it's all said and done with middle school and high schoolers. About 50 of those students have said, hey, I need financial assistance. Like, I would love to go, but I just financially can't make it happen. And part of the reason why is because for some of those students, their parents don't come to North Point. They just come Sunday night to Inside Out. And their parents are like, what is this church thing? You actually like church? That's weird, And what's this boot camp, Camp 75 thing? And how much? $369 for a week-long camp? I mean, which, by the way, is a massive bargain when you think about what they get. But, I get it. It's like, what's this whole church thing? And so these students are like, man, I'd love to go, but my parents, they're saying they're not going to pay for it, but they'll allow me to go. Or we have families here at North Point, and life has ups and downs, and financially you have ups and downs, and there's a lot of our students who are going, I'd love to go, but I need financial assistance. So if you have the capacity, or if God said, hey, this is the way you can help with Camp 75, to sponsor a student, or to sponsor 10% of a student, 50% of a student, or sponsor 10 students, whatever, to go to boot camp, that is a game changer in their lives, and that is a remarkable investment in the next generation. So for all of that, in terms of how do I do that? How do I help? How do I take that step? I would encourage you to go to camp75.org. If you go there on the front of the page, it says get involved. You click on that. It talks about the host homes in more details, talks about drivers in more details, and it talks about how to sponsor a student. Also, after you leave today, in our foyer, there's a kiosk, a Camp 75 kiosk. If you have more questions, you can absolutely ask those questions there. So as we wrap up our time today, I just think this was one of those conversations that we had. It's an invitation that Jesus invited us to do something extraordinary. That Jesus said, choose to leverage me for the benefit of you. If you're willing to do this, it's a trust thing. But if you're willing to leverage you for the benefit of those on the other side of you, it's a game changer. And it's a game changer with Camp 75, and we see it every single year where incredible stories are told of students whose lives have changed and students whose lives have changed the lives around them. And I could tell you so many stories. But as we end our time, I just want to share one story with you. And it's a story of a student named Madison. And what happened in her life is incredible. Take a look.
This is Madison. And she has a unique story. In 2017, at the age of 15, she accepted an invite to one of North Point's student events. During this time, she was given the opportunity to serve the homeless by handing out clothes and meals, and what she saw broke her heart. She wanted to do more. She couldn't help but do more. She asked herself the question, what if this wasn't just a one-time thing? What if this could be done monthly or weekly? Like any reasonable person, she doubted. What more could one high school student do? But while at North Point, she discovered that there was a Savior who loved her, and there is a God who is for her. She placed her faith in Christ and decided that she wasn't going to stand by, that she was just going to do it. And on March 18th, 2018, as a 16-year-old high school student, Madison Meyer took a step of bravery and founded the organization Meals from Madison to feed the homeless in Austin. Since then, she has fed thousands, including over 600 during Camp 75 alone, by partnering her nonprofit with us, and recently won the KVU 5 Who Care Award given to people making a difference in Austin. Every year, hundreds of students come together to make a difference in our city through Camp 75. In 2018 alone, there were nearly 500 students who took part, and through Camp 75, we were able to partner with 20 nonprofit orgs, and our students came together collectively serving 7,000 hours. And most importantly, over 40 students chose to place their faith in Christ and get baptized in the last 12 months. Madison is just one of over 1,000 students who have engaged in Camp 75. But there are thousands of students in the city of Austin who don't know that there is a God that loves them and is for them. Not only that, but we live in a broken city with much to be done. The next generation has the creativity, drive, and influence to do something about it. They just need to be given a voice. Camp 75 is an opportunity to show these students that they matter to their Heavenly Father and that they can make a difference. Madison is just one student who chose to do something significant. She's now given 2,200 meals to the homeless. Imagine if this year at Camp 75, the next Madison is waiting to hear about a God who is for them. Imagine the impact our students could make.
It's incredible. And we collectively, as a church, have such an opportunity to make a decision, to accept the invitation of Jesus Christ and impact the next generation in incredible, incredible ways. Guys, the bottom line of today is that Jesus invited you and invited me into something extraordinary. And Jesus said, when you choose to leverage me for the benefit of you, when you in your relationships, in your marriage, in your parenting relationships, in your organizations, in life, just say, man, this is tough and it's uncomfortable, and man, I may not have the energy, but I'm going to leverage me for the benefit of you. That is an invitation to experience something extraordinary in your life, in Camp 75, and this summer, to where we could find ourselves in August looking back on the summer of 2019 and go, wow, that was the best summer ever. Let me pray for us. Father, thank you for this moment. Thank you for this day. Thank you that we can just have a conversation like this. And God, I know we're all at different spots. I know we have a million things that are going on in our lives and so many different choices. But God, I'm so grateful that you preserved the scriptures so that we could have this unique discussion today. And God, as we think about this and what it looks like to help and whatever that means for us, God, I know there's so many complexities, and you know those complexities. You know our hearts. And so this week, would you give us the courage? Would you give us the wisdom? Would you give us the discernment to know what it looks like to take a step, to accept the invitation of Jesus Christ and leverage what you've given us for the benefit of those around us? God, I trust you with that. In Jesus' name, amen. Guys, thanks so much for being here. I'll see you next week.